So if you just joined us, welcome. You're listening to the Celtic Coach radio show with your host, the Celtic Coach. And this, of course, our show is dedicated to men and to all things manly. All right, our next guest hails all the way from Vancouver. Yes, she's calling in from Vancouver, believe it or not. And an incredible lady, Patricia Irwin. And Patricia is a life coach. A certified professional life coach, business consultant, an entrepreneur, a speaker, a well-sought-after speaker, may I say, and has written many, many books with a vast knowledge base that spans a variety of careers and experiences. Now, we're going to be talking to Patricia here about her book called The Waveriders, and we want to thank Patricia for coming in today. Let's see if we can pull her up on the airway. Hello, Patricia.
Oh, hello. I'm hearing music.
Oh, you're hearing music. You know, how about... it might be the music between us, Patricia.
It might be.
I'm going to hang up the phone here on my end, and we are good to go. You hearing me loud and clear,
I'm hearing you in just nice and clear right now. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show. I know you're a busy lady. You do a lot of wonderful things out there in Vancouver. And are you originally now from Vancouver, Pat?
Actually born in Toronto, raised in Vancouver, and I'm actually 5 hours north of Vancouver in the Okanagan Valley, the beautiful Okanagan Valley, and in the town of Vernon, BC. Oh. Canada, eh?
No, you wouldn't say that you have like a very deep Canadian accent, you know? Or would I be totally off? I'm Irish. I could be totally off with that now.
Yeah, those A's pop in every now and then, you know, and I think you hear it when we say the word about and we say roof, right? It's a little bit different than the red roof.
and you know, it almost sounds a little, well, I mean, there's so much of European influence out there, right? You even, what is it, like things like harbour, H-A-B, O-U-R as opposed to O-R? So yeah,
we spell a little differently.
That's all right. We won't hold it against you. Well, Pat, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Now, we're talking about managing your energy and rocket fueling your life. Now, before we get into that, Pat, would you share with us just a little bit of like your own experience of how, what inspired you or led you to write this book, the Waveriders book? I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fabulous book.
Well, thank you, Dermot. This version of the book, too, I first published a book in 2000, and this version of the book was about 2010 it came out, was much more solution to it. The other one was kind of a theory, right, an observation. So what happened was, in my own family, there was a lot of mental illness. There was from all different levels. There was, people that were watching for the invasion of Russia. There was, and I laugh because you know what, we really do need to lighten up and be lighthearted about it. It's a serious thing, but we need to lighten up. So there was all sorts of things, and on the darker side, there were suicides as well. So and attempted suicides, and so I started, sort of first of all wondering what was going on, and then it was very interesting. All of a sudden, I started noticing men and women around me who were, the most intelligent, the most creative, the most personable, and all of a sudden they would tell me that, I'm getting treated for depression. And I thought, what is that? What's going on there? Why are these people all of a sudden succumbing to depression? And the one common thing I started to notice was this burning rocket fuel, that they actually really, really were high achievers mostly, right? And you can be a high achiever as a parent, you can be a high achiever as a business person, you can be a high achiever as a career person, an author, whatever it is, right? Musician, artist.
It's not just for you said that musician and artists, right? It's for,
and that burning rocket fuel. I'm sorry, I just didn't hear you there. Sorry, go ahead.
So, well, it's, because the people listening in, they might think, it's, this is just all about artists and creative types. But really, most of us, like on a regular basis, be it businessmen or stay-at-home moms, we all tend to kind of, rocket fuel our lives and then burn out at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of us are creative too, right? We all have it. We've just been told that we don't have it, but we all express it in different ways. You might be just an idea generator. An idea generator is still creative, right? And creativity in itself is on the rise. In mines. I think these burning rocket fuel is kind of on the rise because if you think about even evolution, we need to be creative now to stay globally competitive. So it's important for everyone. It's important that we acknowledge that there's changes in the way that we operate through every day. But just getting back to this other one, so I just noticed, like, what is this, what's going on there? I started to watch the patterns, and as I did, I started to write, basically in 2000 about this theory I had, about maybe, just maybe, there's more creative minds on the rise, and we just don't have a manual to operate them. And so we burn rocket fuel, but we burn out because we don't create rules for ourselves to operate with. Now, nobody likes the word rules, right? But we're talking about fun rules,
Right.
Rules that really help you to optimize your who you are in the world.
So, when you talk about now rocket fuel, Pat, and you talk about burning out, and you talk about people who really are, burning the candle on both ends, Robin Williams definitely jumps out at me. Now, would he be considered like a professional wave rider? I mean, how would you look at now somebody like him?
Well, I'd be guessing, of course, right? But
Sure.
Anyone who's using that adrenaline, you just watch his energy as he was using his humor. When you're on top of it like that, you're really in the zone. Often that is adrenaline surging through your body, and it feels really, really good.
It
to have that. And when you think about it, it makes sense, right? Because adrenaline is part of that fight or flight, and so it was created for us to be smarter, think faster, move better, coordinate better, look for options better, all of these things, think faster. So that's what it was meant for. And when we get it, whether the alarm goes off, we get an idea in the shower, we just get someone gives us a great testimonial, whatever it is, it sets off our adrenaline. We're starting to trigger it on our own now. And as we do, we really like the feeling. And so that feeling, because we're so great in the zone of rocket fuel, we want to stay there.
Sure.
Now, when you think about it, that's like operating at 150%. If you were to operate a manufacturing plant at 150% at all times, at maximum capacity, you would have no room for innovation, for maintenance, for any of that stuff. So what happens to us, it's very hard to reach somebody when they're in that because the adrenaline kind of has a voice. It's almost like, cocaine in a way, right? Only this is free within our body. And it says to us, no, don't listen to her. It says to us, listen to me. You are better. You are better. Riding rocket fuel.
A lot of people, Pat, that are riding, and I speak from my own experience now here, but a lot of people that are riding that adrenaline wave, and before I ask that, actually, Pat, it may be good for us to clarify, for the listeners out there who've just joined us, what is a wave rider, and how would somebody know that they are one?
Well, I've come to really believe that in essence we're all wave riders at different levels. So if you think of an ocean, an ocean can be pretty calm. And so many people might be just like that, the energy that they have as they go through the day. And they might be really calm, and they might be using about 70% of their energy, putting in 70% of what they do each day. And so they can go along 9 to 5 easily. Then you get, the bigger waves, sort of those rolling hills, right, where you might jump up really quickly with energy and then, and then slowly come down just a little bit to a little bit more calm. And then we get the waves of that movie, The Perfect Storm. Then you have the high waves and the low trenches of the wave where you can jump up and you're so high, you're talking so fast, you're pacing, you're not finishing, you're not completing. If you think of the motivational speakers, Tony Robbins, listen to that. That's sort of a snapshot there of really high energy, right? And that's great when it's going out over a crowd, but, on one-on-one,
right,
talking to each other, that's not great communication.
At the cubicle at work, it doesn't work.
Yeah, you don't want to be, before I started to learn to actually find my optimal me at any level. So whereas my optimal communicator, for example, if you're out for a huge crowd and you're trying to motivate them, then being at the very, very top of that wave, that works somewhat good. If you go too high, you're gone too far and you're not making sense anymore. You're sort of like the heart fibrillating, you're sort of moving, but nothing's really happening. So there's levels on these waves where we operate better, right? So just slightly the rolling hills may be higher, maybe a better communicator than the highest wave possible, because I remember days when I would walk in excitement to see people, and I'd blabber on, and they'd shake their head and say, "What did she say?"
Yeah, because you'd be making sense to yourself, but you might not necessarily be making sense to the other person.
Absolutely, and you're also sort of having this urge, this sense of having to say something right now. You just, you've got an idea, and you just got to go with it right now. Got to tell everybody about it. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that it's one of those things where it's got to come out. You can't sit still. Now, what about children? I mean, are children? You see children because, and this is something that's kind of becoming an epidemic in our society right now, we're giving Ritalin and all these different drugs to these kids who can't sit still at school. I mean, what's going on there? Are these kids mentally ill, or what else is going on there, Pat?
Okay, so first I want to address it. There are definitely high levels of the wave that that perhaps can't be sort of self-controlled. Like to learn to. One of the techniques, for example, adrenaline is part of the sympathetic nervous system. So when it shoots out, that's what it does. It gets all our blood vessels going like crazy, and it takes 4 hours for them to calm down again, our blood vessels, okay? The opposite to that is the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's the breathing. And that is, I love the way that they describe it, is the rest and digest part of our nervous system, or another way to say it is the feed and breed part of our system. And so for the most part, we can learn absolutely to control and balance these waves. Now, so in schools now, there's lots. Matter of fact, I wrote a book for children called "Teach Me to Breathe" to help, and so many thoughts come up around this. There's an old quick story about Gillian Lynn, who was an 8-year-old who, in the 30s, before they had all sorts of diagnosis, couldn't sit still in her classroom. And they took her to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist walked out of the room with her mother and turned on a radio, and they watched her dance so primally that it was beautiful to watch. And the doctor said, "You know what? Your daughter is not sick. Send her to dance school. She's a dancer." And so she became one of the top choreographers, and she became, she was part of pulling together Cats and the Phantom of the Opera. And she just said, "You know what? In this school, there were more people like me who had to move in order to learn. There is even studies and schools operating right out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, here in Canada, and other schools, where they're putting now treadmills into math classes, because they just know that if they can get them moving, even kids that could not sit still before are learning. Are able to sit and learn. They jog while they're doing their math table. Yeah. Why are we not doing that? Why are we sitting?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me, because you look at kids today and they're so full of energy and they can't sit still, and then we give them drugs to try and pacify them or settle them down or calm them down, when really and that's kind of the quick fix, right? That's like the easy fix. Oh, just give them a drug. Whereas in our society we're all about quick this and quick that. Whereas what you're talking about in your book is you're talking about different, and we're going to get into these, but solutions and ways that we can, techniques that we can actually calm ourselves down, balance ourselves out, and ride that wave at a much more, shall we say, balanced level. But you get more done, right? Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what happens? you don't hit the lows, right? You might have a bit of a low day, but you respect it. You learn to respect it as having use as well. And you have certain times where you can say to yourself, okay, I recognize that right at this moment I'm at this higher wave where I may not be communicating well, and now I need to go address, a team. And so in that team, you're going to have people who are reflective and think slower, and you don't want to come in like a bulldozer, right? So you just decide and you take some breathing. And amazingly enough, it brings you down to a level where you can communicate. And people can understand. So if you're trying to put across something that's really important, you want to make sure that you're slowing down enough that people can grasp it and hold on to it. I just have can I read you a quick quote that I love from Sir Ken Robinson about kids?
Yeah, and mention Sir Ken Robinson now. He's doing a lot of wonderful work in the world.
With,
education,
he's doing great work. He's the one that says, "Hey, you know what? We all have creativity, but someone just stole our crayons," something like that. Yeah. But in this one, he says, if you sit kids down hour after hour, doing low-grade clerical work, don't be surprised if they start to fidget. Kids are not, for the most part, suffering from a psychological condition. They're suffering from childhood.
Oh, how perfect is that? And
we have such a hard time sitting still for 8 hours in a room, and to expect children to do it's difficult. So lots, and I want to give credit to, the teachers are under pressures, of getting things done quickly and have a hard time, spending time and working these things out. Yet there are lots of teachers now also bringing this in, and at the same time, we can start as parents from home. The interesting part I find, I sort of think about this as the first addiction. We really like to amp our kids up, for sure. We see our kids as really high energy, and I believe they are as the generations are coming more creative, using more of that creative mind.
Yes, very noticeable.
Yeah, and at the same time, Christmas morning, I even remember watching a TV commercial. I can't remember what they said, but this will get you the big bang, right? Buy this present, your kids will really get the big rush. So the rush is adrenaline, right? So here we go, Christmas morning, woo, open all the, remember the disappointment afterwards? The rush was over, the adrenaline was sort of, now what? We may spend the rest of our lives seeking out that rush. And so our kids are actually being trained to use adrenaline.
Oh, that's a good point.
And to seek it.
Yeah.
And yet we're not teaching the other side, right? So where's your energy level at now? It's interesting with the book, too, because the one that I did for kids, Teach Me to Breathe, the children in there started teaching other children how to adjust their energy. That was the most fabulous news that I ever heard.
That is beautiful, yeah, and I've read the Teach Me to Breathe. It's a beautiful children's book, and we'll give the listeners some websites and stuff to connect to that. But I want to go back to something that you said, because I think it's a very, very important point of discussion. Is this adrenaline high being used as a drug? And most people may think of that as, oh, well, that's just for the artists, for the creative people, but we have a lot of stats right now in the world, figures that show that 1 in 10 people are on some type of antidepressant, and 1 in 4 women over the age of 40 are on antidepressants.
If I could interrupt, let's not think this is a woman's show, right?
That's right. No, we're throwing that out because the men are going to tell the women later.
For you. Yeah, I have some men's stats for you.
Go for it. Yeah.
So, and often men are the hardest to reach. It's like we don't like instructions, we don't like directions, but also, we have been really pressured as men. Well, I'm not a man, but men have been really pressured, perhaps all of their life or generations, to operate at maximum capacity for as long as possible. Yeah. And if you cannot, then something's weak with you. Just suck it up like all the rest of us.
Be a man.
Right? So that attitude, let me share with you this. For men, it's higher than women for suicides. 79% of United States suicides are men. Let's put another stat in here. An estimated 8.3 million adults are having suicidal thoughts.
Wow.
Right? This breaks down in suicides in 2010 in the United States, an average of 105 a day. Now, for every one suicide, there's approximately 25 attempts.
Yeah.
And these stats, of course, are the only admitted ones, right?
Right.
You know, so how high is it? So some people used to say, 1 in 5 people will suffer from mental illness. Well, now they're saying they estimate it's going to be 5 in 5. So I'm questioning, are we all becoming mentally ill, or is it time to start balancing that wave?
So what?
Because if you burn up all of the adrenaline energy that you get from that, what will happen is you'll first of all still be trying to stay up there because that's the best you, and it might even turn into negative sort of angry energy. Anybody who comes around to try to stop you, to slow you down, and then next you cannot hold up and your body just shuts down and it goes into the low. And if you've been doing it for a long time, it goes into the real low, and it's kind of like having your glass empty now, right? And if you've done it for 6 months, I figured it's going to take, and these are my theories, right? It's going to take about another year or so to really get that glass full. And if you're focused on the negative parts of you, you're going to dig that hole deeper faster.
Well, Pat,
and so that's the part that I believe is increasing. And interesting enough, I said I wrote my first theory in 2000. Well, the beauty of that is there's so many stats now that are following the same theory.
Yeah.
We burn out our adrenal glands, and we no longer have happy chemicals. And then the next thing you know, we can't rely on ourselves, and this whole new pattern starts. We're not sure how long we can hang on doing something because we end up in a low.
Yeah, well, now, and you bring up a good point, Pat, too, because we're talking about mental illness, and we're talking about, and I believe these are all related. Using adrenaline as a high, mental illness, and of course depression being on the rise. Now, how would someone know? Because you do talk about this in the book, that mental illness is linked to being a Waverider. Now, how would somebody know, whether, hey, I just need to maybe learn some techniques, or I actually need to go to, the pharmacy and get some Ritalin or, some type of antidepressant drug?
Mm-hmm. And, of course, I'm not a doctor, so I can't diagnose. And I like to work with mental health as opposed to mental illness. I like to work with prevention. And this, what I'm talking about is you can self-test it yourself. It takes a little time to practice and get it, but you can definitely, in fact, I'm working on that program I was talking to you about, this called Your Optimal You, and that is about, just observing yourself, observing what different levels you're at. Now, if you're at a very high level, for example, and cannot bring it down, okay, it may be habit, and it might be that you need help. You need some assistance to help you to level that out, right?
And when you say high level, Pat, you mean that somebody who's functioning at, they're just like on all the time?
Yeah, and they just, they're going out and there's a tendency at the very highest levels. You spend all your money, all sorts of different addictions come up, all sorts of things, right? And so they're just constantly, they're not sleeping, they're just on this high ride of adrenaline, not sleeping at all, and then they might crash totally. So the highest levels and the lowest levels can either be, I believe, a habit, or be just even part of us that is at the highest creativity levels, right? So when we talk about, some of the famous artists that we know that cut ears off and things like that,
sure.
If you're about to cut your ear off, I would suggest you see a doctor. If you're about to commit suicide, I would suggest you see a doctor. And sometimes it is that you need help just to see the forest for the trees. And as you get out, then you can begin to look at this way and say, hey, what about this? Because with all that depression, antidepressant use, we're still seeing that it's not really disappearing.
It's not.
Right?
It's not a long-term solution, Pat. It can't be. And I speak from experience. I've gone through periods of my own life, in my 20s and 30s, where doing pot and cigarettes and alcohol and all that stuff, and it's great for short term, but by God, it. When it moves into addiction and you can't live without it and can't live with it, you hate it and you love it. That's a pretty tough place to be in. Now, I want to get back to depression a little bit, Pat, because in terms of just the amount of antidepressants that's being used in America. How much or how would a person, so we can kind of move into a little bit of a solution topic here in terms of like, there are so many people that are, AKA depressed. I mean, and I have so many friends. There's plenty of my friends. I call them up. I say, hey, how's it going? I say, oh, okay. I said, well, what are you doing? Oh, nothing. And you kind of want to hang down the phone and say, oh, God, I'm not calling that person again. But how do we, let's say we are in a depressed state, and we're just talking about average Joes now. We're not talking about, the Robin Williams of the world. How do we start to lift ourselves out of that, especially if we are, someone who does like a lot of adrenaline or who works a lot, or is even, the stay-at-home moms who are working 24/7 to keep the house going and clean the kids and do all of that stuff. What are some of the ways that people can start to kind of bring themselves back up out of that depression?
So first of all, I don't want to encourage anyone to jump off any antidepressants because if you have to wean off them. Otherwise, you could get thrown into a suicidal spin. They're quite dangerous to get off of. So you really want to make sure you're still working with your doctor and you're saying, hey, I want to try some of these things as I do it. So the first thing is, and I'm giving a shout-out to the stay-at-home dads, too, the first thing is to, really accept yourself at all levels. Even though your brain is telling you, you stink. You stink at this level, You're not good at anything. You don't feel like doing anything. So when we're at the lowest level, the best thing to do right away is to stop thinking. I know that's hard. I've been there, so I totally get it, right? But one, you have to realize that you're not thinking in a proper way right now. You've sort of got, dark-colored glasses on, and so really it's not the best time to figure things out. But boy, do we ever try. We're going to step in. We're in the lowest of our energy, and now we're going to say, I hate my job. I got to figure out what I'm going to do next. Don't do that. Have in advance, before you hit the low where you cannot see anything, this is the overly pessimistic level. The highest level is overly optimistic. So at this level, you're at the overly pessimistic, okay? So the best thing to do here is whatever you can to nurture yourself. Now, if you can prepare something in advance that is even just a list, you know what? Turn on music. Take a short walk, 10-minute walk. A list of things that when you're in a higher level of the wave, that you actually enjoy, that you enjoy on a normal sort of basis. Now, when you do that, you don't expect that you're going to take that walk, turn on some music, and you're going to feel instantaneously better. It will increase the serotonin within you, and it's kind of like an empty glass. If you've gone too far too long and you're too deep, that glass is empty. You've got to build it up, drop by drop by drop, and every single little thing you can do that is towards the positive brings in that, let's just call them happy chemicals a little bit. Even something as small as doing something positive for somebody else and or observing someone doing something positive, a random act of kindness increases that serotonin. You can also get it, studies have found, by doing survival work with your hands. So if you're chopping food for dinner or you're out in the garden, using the hands and doing things for your survival actually increases serotonin. So there's lots of little ways to keep filling up that glass to help you get up. Just don't expect it too quick. You empty the glass. Be kind with yourself. The low has benefits. At the top, you're overly optimistic. At the bottom, you're overly pessimistic. But on some levels below that, before you get to the bottom, there are great ways. You see, when you're on the higher wave, you are so optimistic that you don't really look at the details. You look at the overall of what you're creating. Right. So, say I'm a manager, somebody comes in, they're on a bit of that higher wave. Then you tell me about a new project. Boom, 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 boom. They're talking really fast. They're not breathing. And I can see that they're on an adrenaline wave. I don't assume it, but I can sort of guess, right? And as they do that, I realize that, okay, it's a great idea. However, guess what? The details may not be there. So take time before you invest money in that. Take time and allow that person to come down off that adrenaline, to be just at a bit lower range where they can start looking at the details of the project. So it affects us in everything we do, our decisions, how we work on projects, everything. Now, did I answer your question? Because I sure can go on, can't I?
Beautifully. We're going to take a little break here, Pat, just for a second. I'm going to do a studio announcement, and we will be right back with Patricia Irwin.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you just joined us, you're listening to KOWS LP 107.3 FM in Occidental, California, community radio for West Sonoma County. And, of course, if you're on planet Earth somewhere, you can listen in on KOWS.FM, F for Frank, M for Matilda. That's after my sheep. All right, we're talking here with Patricia Irwin today with her book, The Waveriders, Master Your Patterns, Master Your Life. Patricia, welcome back.
Well, thank you.
This is it's so relevant and such a wonderful, rich conversation, Patricia, in terms of what's going on in the world today. Now, it's very interesting because I wrote down a little quote when I was reading your book, but I picked this quote up off the web from a guy, Tony Schwartz, and he said, "We're not meant to operate like computers, that are on all the time. We're designed to pause, to pulse between spending and renewing energy." Could you talk a little bit more, Pat, about this idea of how we spend and how we renew our energy?
Absolutely. And I think that this is the key here. That, we hear all these things, let's talk about mental illness. I want to say, stop that for a minute. Let's talk about optimal mental health. Now, this optimal is not maximum, right? It's not go forever. So really, again, I love this analogy of the manufacturing plant where they cannot operate at peak levels all the time, or the machinery will even stop breaking down. Now, on top of that, there's no time for innovation, right? So if we are operating ourselves at our peak levels, we don't have time for sitting back and being quiet and looking at ways to innovate. And again, so as we're operating at maximum levels, we are also not maybe looking at the finer details. So just as an artist, and I hate to refer to artists because they're always called creative, but, so I'm an idea generator. That's what my creativity really, really comes out as. And so in that, again, in a moment of adrenaline, I can organize, say, a trade show, and I can see how it's going to work and how beautiful it's going to work and how people are going to come and how wonderful it's going to be and how much money we're going to make and all of those things, right? But I have to come down and breathe a little bit to come down to that renewing level as well, because if you're burning rocket fuel, it takes more of your body and your mind. And that's what that spending is. It's not just the spending, it's the spending rocket fuel at a higher level.
Right.
And then as we come down, we're also renewing. We're renewing our bodies, we're renewing our minds, we're allowing for new thoughts to come in. As long as we're not, it's the time for let's say not at the deepest depression level, but let's just say at the level that's not high, full of adrenaline. We're just a little bit below. And all of a sudden now, we're able to look with our critical self, and I want to make a point here. The critical self is to look at what we're doing as a supportive critical self, not a tear me down critical self, which is what happens.
I like that supportive critical self. Now here, I want to read a little bit from your book, The Waveriders. You have in here a little thing, and I found it very interesting, where you talk about some of your surge signals and how you identify them. And I think this is relevant for anyone who is on any level on the wave, because I know that a lot of the times I'm riding that wave, and I may even be just a little above, I don't want to say average or normal, but if 1 was a small wave and 10 would be the big wave. Is there a way, Pat, that you have that you describe that in terms of the waves, like a numerical system? Or?
Yes, I have an actual. If you think of the wave pattern, almost like the ocean or a heart wave, there's a line that goes through the middle of that, which we would say, sort of the neutral point. And if you think that from that point to the top wave, 1 to 10, on a scale of 1 to 10, where might you be at any given time? And on a scale of 1 to 10 in the lower wave, where might you be at any given time? So it doesn't mean the low is bad. It just means that the low is good for certain things. And you mentioned, how does a person know? How does a person recognize that they're moving up? And for each person, it may be a little bit different. However, there's some common things. For example, there is that urge to talk. And the urge to talk on the higher wave is that you got to tell everybody everything right now, because if you don't, they're just
explode.
It's so important, right? And at the lowest wave, you can, at the lowest, say in a 10, at the low, you can't pick up the phone.
So would you call that state depression state, or just you? How do you?
Yeah, let's just call it, the sad, low energy
right,
state.
Low side, yeah.
Yeah. We're calling, the world is calling it depression, and I just need to stay away with the fact that I'm not a doctor to claim that, right?
Yeah.
And so I call it a place of sadness, like a 10, right? A 10, you can't get out of bed. And I need to share this, too, that studies have found, like people wonder, well, I wake up lethargic, I wake up sad, I wake up not wanting to do anything. And studies in the UK have found, if you go to bed with worry in the night, that your brain will operate at the REM sleep, which is much faster. So in other words, it's like getting in your car, putting it in neutral, turning it on, and putting your gas to the floor. So it's really revving up high. Your brain is operating at that level while you sleep. So while you think you got rest, you didn't. Your brain was working. And it is only 2%, but it uses, in weight as far as our whole body goes, but it burns a lot of energy.
Right.
And so you wake up with these feelings. Now, the little trick there is to just, to make sure that your worry is answered. If you can't pay your bills, you say, okay, you know what? Okay, but I've got it on the schedule that I'm going to figure it out next week or whatever it is, right? But you get rid of the worry. You don't leave unanswered questions in your brain. But back to this different level. So at the highest level, you need to absolutely speak. And at the lowest level, you can't pick up the phone. You don't know why, but it's just too hard. You can't phone anybody and talk to anybody. And so there, you might not be social anymore, right? So at the very top, you're like talking to everybody. At the very bottom, you're not. Remember, there's many, many levels in between this. Now, one of the levels, and it's the higher levels that throw you into the lower levels. So one of the things I do on a consistent basis is I watch, I'm aware of my speech. If it starts to go fast and I have that urge to talk, I try to catch it right away and take some breaths. So even while I'm here and talking, I can feel I'm not at my peak 10 level, but I am talking still. I have some adrenaline in me right now. So I'm about a 2 or 3 in my adrenaline. You can hear me slowing down now. Just take a breath, right? And keep yourself so that you're not heading up too high. The other, another sign may be pacing. You start to pace back and forth. You're on the phone talking. You're pacing back and forth. Another one is not finishing things. You start to work on this, and you jump over to another project.
Gosh, I know that one well. I know that one well. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's, and there's, like I said, many, many levels in between there. So knowing and understanding, it means that you can identify your rocket man, we'll call him at the very top, identify your rocket man, and identify your, let's call the next one, you can even have characters if you like, right?
I like this.
So call one your communicator self. Now, I had someone share with me that their communicator self was from the show The Matrix and Neo.
Yeah.
Right? Like sort of, so a communicator self, not Rocket Man, but a communicator self. And so when we do that, not only are what I believe is preventing mental illness, we are optimizing our mental health and becoming more productive consistently and becoming better at the different levels and the different sort of characters that are within us.
That's beautiful. Now you have a few techniques, quite a few in the book, Pat, that I really appreciate. And of course, after reading your book a few weeks ago, I started implementing this taking a nap during the day. Now, it wasn't, go to bed, put the covers over, get the hot water bottle, put on the Zen music, but just taking for me, it was a 20-minute nap because I'm a bit of a high achiever. I like to perform at a maximum level during the day. So I found it very helpful in your book that you talked about some of the Waverider techniques. And for me, one of the biggest ones that really has been working great for me is just taking this, hitting the pause button and taking 20 minutes of a nap. Now, what's the benefit? I could speak from my own experience, but just in terms of these naps that you talk about in the book, Pat, what's the benefit there for someone?
Well, the first benefit that comes to mind is that you can't stay high on adrenaline when you're napping, for sure. And so it sort of balances out.
It's hard. I've tried it. It doesn't work.
Yeah. It's a bit of a brain dump as well, And I think there's so many people who have that mid-afternoon low where they can't function anymore, and yet we push through that, right? We push through it thinking that, but if every employee is like that, you're getting a few hours maybe in there where you're not really getting great production, right? And isn't it fabulous to know that, countries now like Japan, for example, are acknowledging the power of the cat nap or the power nap, if you have it, where they're actually allowing at work beds to be underneath the desk.
Wow.
They actually have nap bars.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they actually have nap bars.
Yeah.
Because they just realized if they could give someone a 15-minute power nap, they come back twice as strong.
Yeah. Does it reboot the brain too, in terms of energy or chemicals or anything like that?
Yeah, I was just even listening to something just recently about the brain and how does the brain, the rest of our body, how does it get rid of its toxins and its waste? And the brain is totally different than the rest of the body. It doesn't have the same sort of system going on. And so one of the ways it does is through sleep. And so we need to sort of do that. And if you've been burning rocket fuel, you can sort of assume, I don't have the research to back it up, but you could sort of assume that guess what? You got lots of waste there, material.
Oh,
You've been burning energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So your waste, you're sort of like, you think you could maybe call it a septic brain.
Yeah.
And that little break maybe is just enough to renew us. I don't know about you, but when I give myself permission to do that, and here's another thing, some people say, I can never nap, and maybe some people can't, but it might be a sign that your adrenaline's running so strong that you need to breathe it down.
Yeah, you can't even stop during the day.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I've had people say, you know what, Pat? I cannot, I don't have the time for this. Breathe? Are you kidding? I don't have the time. When you think about that, it's the addiction, it's the adrenaline power of that drug talking. Because what are you telling me? That you don't have 1 minute to take oxygen in? Mm. Is that not maybe something we need to look at?
Yeah.
And, again, that drug is so powerful that people hear those words. They hear that, you're better, you're better this way. You always operate great under pressure, right? And so, we often leave projects until we can get under pressure and get a hit of adrenaline.
Yeah.
We might get into anger bouts because guess what? Anger does.
Well, would it be fair to say, Pat, that that's why a lot of people in the morning, in terms of either getting that hit or some type of, in the morning, coffee intake in the last 20 years has gone up by, I don't even know what the stats are, but it's something like ridiculous. Sugar use among children is off the planet. Diabetes is off the scales. Would you say that is us kind of just wanting to get something to like get us through the day or get us up and going?
Yeah, to keep us up at those higher levels. And, interesting to think about, even the alarm clock in the morning, depending on the sound of your alarm clock, can give you a jolt of adrenaline to get you going.
Yeah.
And excitement, I don't want to say to anybody, don't get excited, but know and be aware that if you've just gotten excited about something, right? You got a raise, whatever it is. You won the lottery. You're getting a jolt of adrenaline, and when you do, it's not bad to do that, but just breathe for a few minutes, and you will still have the creativity. You will still have all of that, and yet you won't be burning out so quickly.
Mm. In your book, Pat, that you have the 9 Waverider Techniques. Share some of the most important ones and how we can use those in our lives.
Yeah, and sort of the first for me is always awareness, just being aware of how you are operating in the world, being aware of that, when adrenaline has entered your body and when you're riding that. And you can still have times when you have it, and then just know that you really need to balance after that. If I'm really excited about something, I just say, okay, I just need to take a few moments to be quiet, just because we need to balance it. So awareness is really one, right? The other one is, so when you notice that you're going on the higher adrenaline ride, then to breathe. That's number one. Check yourself. When I first started, I had to really leave the room, take a breath. It would take me a lot of slow, deep breathing to bring it down.
Belly breathing, yeah.
Yeah, and now what happens is I'll say it right in the middle of a conversation. Hang on a second, I have to breathe. Because we're so used to filling all the space, right? Talk, do. We don't stop. So I just even stop in the middle of a conversation if I notice and just take 2 or 3 deep breaths just to bring me to a place where I'm not, riding that high level of adrenaline. Yeah. Then if you watch that, what'll happen is you'll actually stay really creative, really, have your ideas generating, all of that stuff. You'll still have all the great benefits of it, but you won't drop so low when you burn out, right, when you use it up. So the trick is not really to use it all up. So as you do that, then you start to breathe. You come down to a bit lower level. You're able to produce. People are able to hear what you're saying. And then just notice that if you do start to head to a bit lower level, that you, first of all, acknowledge it as okay, too, that you are still good there. Naked, standing in the street, not producing anything, you are still of value. So honor yourself there. This is one part that we don't do, right? We try to stay on that top, stay productive. So honoring ourselves and our reflective self is beneficial too. If you can do that and say, okay, I need rest, I need to do this, you bring in some things that you really enjoy, like your music or a bit of dance, just a little bit of dancing or, hot bath, nice walk, whatever it is, get into nature, you will start to come back up to sort of a level where you're not too high and you're just pleasantly going through life. That's your true self, by the way. That's what I believe, your true self, and it's a much nicer person. We have a tendency to believe that the highest self is the nicest. Not true, really. When you get into that middle, you start making decisions that are better for you. They're not driven by adrenaline, and they're not pushed down by depression. So they're really, really coming from your true self there. Yeah. And it feels really nice to be there. We often are at the top, and we think that's exciting, and we think the bottom is boring, but coming down to that calmer wave is not boring. It's depression that's boring.
Yeah, okay? So when we talk about Sorry, Pat.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to ask, when we talk about, rocket fueling the life but managing the energy, so are you saying that, because I would be, and I'm sure there's a few others out there would think that, well, at my optimum level that you talk about, I need to be at a 10 to get everything done. But you're saying that, and are the levels different for everybody? Like, what would be the optimum levels where, a busy guy can get everything done, go through work, come home, help the wife with the dinner, bring out the trash, read a story to the kids. What would be the optimum level there? Is there one?
Well, let me ask you a question, Dermot. Where do you think you are right now on the way from 1 to 10?
That's a good question. I'd say I'm probably up around 6.5, 7 maybe. A
6.5, 7. So at that level, you're able to be creative.
Well, let's hope so, Pat. Let's hope so.
Yeah, you're able to calm your thoughts enough that this show is not just out of control.
Right.
Okay? If you were to go up even higher than that, you might not make sense on the show.
Yeah.
Right? Now, that's okay. We're allowed to have the higher levels too, right? And at the same time recognizing that when we come home, what level do you want to be when you're at home having dinner with your family?
Gosh, that's a good point. Yeah. So you'd want to be consciously bringing your energy down when you come home. Because a lot of people, you make a great point, Pat, a lot of people go to work and they bring their home with them. And then when they come home from work, they bring their work with them. So how would a person now, let's say he's a high executive or just a lad out working all day long, because when you're working hard, whether it's physically or mentally, your adrenaline is up. So how do you consciously switch from work to home?
Well, even I would suggest that it's even better to continue to stop long enough to breathe as you're producing at a high level rate, because that will help you not to stumble into the low. Because, so there's two answers coming in my head. Let me answer the first one first. So it's going to depend on the individual, right? Notice yourself when you're with family. When are you the best family man? What level? Are you at 2, so you've still got some energy running around and you're laughing and joking? Or are you even a little lower than that, so you're really listening to your family? So each person's going to have a bit different level. Now, the point that I do want to add here is I don't want you to work at a level 8 all day long and go cold turkey and shut it off coming home. What happens with a lot of people is they go 8 or 9 or 10 at a really high level for 10 months out of the year, and then they go on a 2-week vacation and they stop cold turkey and they go, geez,
and they
why
get
am I
sick,
not enjoying this?
They get sick. Do you know, a lot of people who do that, when they go on holidays, they get sick. And it's because they've been, rocket fueling their energy for 8 months, and then they stop, and then the body says, oh, he's stopped. Well, time to clear out all those toxins that he's created from all the stress and the rocket fuel, and they get sick. So that's an interesting correlation.
I went on a great cruise, and I was looking at the Caribbean, and inside I was not enjoying it. Why? Because I spent 10 months before that working really hard to get there. And so all of a sudden it was gone. And, you think about it, too, it's kind of survival mode, right? Where, really when we're running that high adrenaline, we're in that survival mode. And it's interesting because even in the concentration camps, there was very few suicides. But when they were free,
yeah,
suicides increased.
When they were free, the suicides increased.
Yeah, in some ways that's what we're doing, right? We're just going, surviving from one thing to another, and at the same time loving and honoring and enjoying that highest self, our rocket man.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, if we're in survival mode and we're just trying to keep our head above the water, then we're not thinking about anything else except just trying to keep our head above the water. But when we get our head above the water, that's when the damage could be done.
Yeah, so when it's more like it's going along. If you're staying at let's say level 10 burning your rocket fuel, going nonstop, the damage is already sort of being done, right? So that's why we minimize the damage by breathing it down a little bit, so we're not, not soaking up that adrenaline so much, which is really hard on our body and our mind.
Yeah.
And then when, and if you've fallen into this pattern, just acknowledge that you're learning how to balance it now. And know that when you fall into the low, where you're feeling like the world is just a horrible place, and so are you, to not take that low personally. That's where we get into trouble. We take it like it's a personal flaw of ours, and rather than noticing what we did to get there. And so when do people go to the doctor? Not when they're high and making top CEO. They go to the doctor when they can't keep that energy up anymore.
So true.
Because they're falling so low on the wave now. They emptied the glass.
Yep.
And that's all they see. And sometimes the doctor doesn't even say, well, what did you do for the last 2 years, right? Sometimes they don't even ask that. And so we get put onto medicine, we get a label, we walk around with that label, and then we start to carry ourselves with that label. We put on that depression jacket. We lower our shoulders, we put our body language in, we put our head down, and guess what that does to the brain, Dermot? I bet you can guess.
Slows it down.
It tells the brain to act depressed.
Yeah.
To be depressed, because your body and your brain is so connected that as you fold yourself in like that and become that, you become depression, that you're telling the brain, this is who I am and who I want to be.
Yeah, as a man thinketh, so is he.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we have about 5 minutes in the show, Pat. Wanted to just check in. Pat, share with us briefly now. We're talking about managing our energy, rocketing, rocket fuel for our lives. But we also want to talk about the solutions. So just because I'm going to check in with you now. I know that you have a new program being created right now called Your Optimal You, and I want to check in with that because that sounds like just a beautiful program that you're creating for people who we're just talking about here. But share with us, what are some of the main techniques, Pat, some of the most important techniques? You mentioned the cat nap, you mentioned sleep. What are some of the other techniques that we can do that when we do fall off that wave or we're on the low point of the wave, what are some of the things that can help to bring us back up to...
Yeah, one of the most important things, I mentioned earlier is to not take it personally, number one. Number two, to expect that the little bits of good that you're going to do, whether you pick something, clean it up, or just make that phone call that you've been avoiding, not to quit anything. We don't quit at the low wave because it's not a good decision place, but just to say, I'll get a hold of you next week. Whatever it is you need to do,
right, don't
take
quit
a walk, get in nature. Those will start adding and slowly bringing yourself up. Don't think, because if you do, you're going to fall deeper. You're going to dig that hole deeper. And on the top of the wave, continue to help yourself breathe through the whole time, and then take those extra little rests, because remember, you're operating at 150%, not 70%. So because of that, you need to give yourself that little bit. Now, did I miss anything that you think is important there?
No, I think you covered it quite nicely. And, of course, as always, the importance of sleep. And in your book, you have also, and I'm going to invite the readers to pick up a copy because this book is incredible. It's called The Waveriders, Riding the Creativity and Mood Spectrum by Patricia Indigo Irwin. And they can get that on Amazon, Pat?
Yeah, sometimes they don't find. There is another Waveriders out there, which is not my book, but if they go to the website, thewaveriders.com, put the THE in there, they can find a link that will take them to Amazon.
Wonderful. Pat,
they can do that. And they can also reach me there for both programs, all programs too. So. And
the for all the dads out there that want to share that beautiful "Teach Me to Breed" book, is that also available on Amazon?
Yes. It's because I wanted to keep the high quality and keep that really beautiful glossy images. You have to order it from the website teachmetobreathe.com.
Wonderful. Before you go, Pat, two questions. Talk about here for a moment your Optimal You program.
Well, Well, a lot of what we talked about today is just, being a coach as well. So what I do is I, educate people on the different levels and the waves, and I teach and help them to identify, how would you know that you're at your best communication self, right? How would you know that you're at your best planning self, for example? And so I teach that, and then I do some one-on-one coaching as well that helps people to say, okay, I did a really lousy job there, I might say, so where were you on the wave when you didn't communicate well? And where might you want to put yourself in order to really be a good communicator at that time in the future? So I operate with that. It'll be an online program, really easy to do, really positive. Not talking mental health or mental illness. We're talking mental health.
And what's the address for that, Pat?
Well, just go to the Waveriders right now because it's all in development at the moment.
Yep.
It will finish soon. Just go to, the Waveriders info at thewaveriders.com. Send me an email that you want to be on that list, and I will send out the announcement for when it's available right away. And I just, really hope that anybody who's listening here who has questions, who has feedback or anything, sends it into Dermot because I would love to hear, did you hear something that was just, that was maybe something that's going to help change your life? Maybe, Dermot, something that's going to keep dads in the family.
Wonderful, wonderful. I really appreciate that. Pat, thank you so much. Now, before you go, we have 3 questions that we ask all of our guest speakers. They're very simple, don't worry, Pat. So, Pat, take a moment and answer this for our listeners. What makes you happy?
Nature. I love being in nature, and particularly I love being in nature with my border collies, and even have the hobby of sheep herding. I'm a city girl, but of sheep herding, just to help keep my adrenaline level calm.
Beautiful. If you had to be put on a desert island for the rest of your life, Pat, what 3 things from your house would you take with you?
Well, I think I'd have to take my books.
Yeah, what in particular?
Just kidding. Oh.
That's a lot of books.
Well, first of all, it would be my daughter and my animals.
Yeah. We'll say that's 2 things. What would be the 3rd thing then?
What would be the 3rd thing? Okay, the 3rd thing, being a realistic safety kind of person, I'd like to take maybe a Swiss Army knife so you could really survive while you're there.
That's right. You could always be able to cook dinner with that. Wonderful.
Yep.
And last question. Let's say you had to ride the wave, and on the wave was written the meaning of life. What would be on that wave?
Honor your divine design.
Honor your divine design. Beautiful. Pat, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was an absolute pleasure. And as always, of course, we hope that there are some people out there that got some value from the show. This is our service to the planet and, of course, to the community. So thank you so much, Pat, for coming in today, and we wish you all the best. Again, you can pick up the Waveriders book at the waveriders.com and all the other information, Your Optimal You, and, of course, teachmetobreed.com for the children's book. Pat, all the best to you, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thank you, Dermot. And if your listeners would like me to come back and share more, I'm more than happy to do that.
Absolutely, we're going to have you back. There's no question about it.
Well, enjoy the rest of the show, you guys.
Take care, Pat. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye-bye.